Greetings, shipmates. Welcome to this edition of Voyage of Rediscovery, a commemoration of the fall 1998 journey on Semester at Sea. Before we jump in, or shall I say dive in, a reminder that you can follow our voyage, access other conversations, check out all participant bios, learn about and contribute to the fall 1998 commemorative scholarship, as well as order swag from sas25th.com, and that's SAS25th.com. Dolphins, portside! All right, excuse me. Let's start the show. In today's episode, we speak with Catherine Wilson. Kat attended the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and grew up on Hilton Head Island, South Carolina. Kat will share her travels before Semester at Sea and how her linguistic skills turned things around for her, I think, in Morocco. Also, have you ever invented a holiday? Kat and her friends have. Hop on board, everyone. The ship is leaving. Catherine, what was your motivation or inspiration for going on Semester at Sea?
Oh my God. So I studied in France in high school for a year. I was an exchange student. And somehow I had a best friend from France. She was amazing. We went on spring break to Rome, which was like the most amazing thing I could have ever dreamed of, on a train, an overnight train. And we stayed in an abbey with a bunch of nuns, and it was totally random. But it was kind of through the school. So we had like educational trips all throughout the day. And then one night we stayed up and kind of partied, but we had to be back at the Abbey at midnight every night. And we met actually two American guys. They were cousins, and one was studying in London and the other one was studying in Egypt. And they had met in Rome for spring break as well. I think they were in college, we were in high school. But anyway, crazy. But the one guy from London had done Semester at Sea. And he was like, if you like traveling, you should do Semester at Sea. And obviously they did too. And so literally, like, from the time I guess it was 16 at the time, that was all I wanted to do. It sounded like the coolest thing in the world. I grew up where we didn't travel at all. I got my own passport by saving, and then I left the country all with my own, work babysitting money the first time. I don't know, there was just something, I guess, in my soul that has always loved to travel. And so the idea of going on a boat around the world was incredible. And there's some more to that story in terms of, it took me till my junior year to do it. Originally, I was going to do it on my sophomore year. And my friend Erin Reagan, who you might remember from the ship, had committed to some treasury position, and she really wanted to go with me. And so I basically went abroad somewhere else, and then that year, and then waited for her so that we could go on Semester at Sea together. So that's the long answer, but it was like my dream from the moment I heard of it.
That's great. And unlike some of the folks that I talked to, it sounds like you actually had a friend going into it, which is unique.
Yes. Well, it was interesting too, because she's still one of my best friends. Actually, we both married Englishmen, like right around the same time. And she has a son who I'm the guide mother for. So we're super tight, and we stayed roommates all 4 years of college, and we did this semester abroad. During the trip, we both ended up with the first couple of countries we traveled together, but then we kind of met other people, and we ended up not traveling together as much towards the end, and then moved back in together when we got back to Chapel Hill. We were cabin mates, and we didn't have enough money to get a porthole, but for some reason we did get a porthole, and we were so excited. Gosh, we would have so much fun. There was what was it? There was swell time. There were two times that the bar was open. It was swell time and horizon hour. I knew it wasn't happy hour. And so I remember we would go to horizon hour, and then we'd get dinner, but we would get enough wine at horizon hour because it was like 2 hours to go back to our room, and then we would like have dance parties, just the two of us, and then we'd go back to swell time.
That's great. It's interesting too, because many of the people that I've spoken with, the room, and I'm not suggesting that your room was more important than it was, but most of the memories that people have been talking about have not been connected to their rooms, but that you had these memorable dance party experiences in your room is just Amazing.
The other really great room story I have was when we went through, I guess it was the Suez Canal. It was November 10th. I remember that. And Justin, Marks, Stefan, Vala, and John Goldberg, and maybe Brent Rogers and we all decided to make a holiday out of it. It was called Passport, like passport, like we were going through the port. And for some reason, like the bar was closed, everything was closed. I don't remember exactly what happened, but we had stocked up on some wine and we went into, I guess it was Justin's cabin, and all day we celebrated Passport because I think we weren't, I mean, I don't really know, but anyway. And then for years afterwards, we would November 10th do Passport. So anyway, those are like the two things that I remember being in the room for. Other than that, yeah, I mean, I didn't even sleep in my room. Almost every single night I slept on the top deck. I had my sleeping bag. And I mean, I think there's only a handful of days I ever slept in that bunk.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
interesting. I don't think I ever knew that.
Yeah, no, I
Wow,
never, I think
incredible.
maybe for a nap every now and then, or maybe the first night or two. And then I literally had my sleeping bag on the deck every single night. And so I'd be up there by myself most nights. And then when we would go into port, I'd get like a whole slew of people.
Amazing. Wow, that's terrific to know. I recall not sleeping much myself and being awake for sunrise quite frequently. But I don't remember like two ships passing in the night, making my way to sunrise and seeing your sleeping bag, but nevertheless, might have taken a different route to see that. That's incredible stuff. So, thinking about the trip, we had this period of time before we landed in Japan. Do you recall what your experience was like in the anticipation of the first port of arrival?
My memory about that was, remember there was that guy and they had closed the pool and he jumped in the pool where there was the hammock, and then he got kicked off in Japan. For me, I actually had people in Japan I knew. So I kind of had like a Japanese family, which is a whole nother story in my life. I was excited to go there, but I'd already spent like a month there one year. I was more excited about the rest of the world, although it was really cool to go see my friends, my sort of Japanese host family that I knew there, and reconnect with them. And it's funny because it's like I haven't ever been back to Japan besides like on a layover, I think, but I've never been outside in the country. And I think at that time I thought I would go more regularly. I think for me, that whole trip across the Pacific, gosh, I mean, remember that's when we crossed the international date line, right? And we got an extra day. And it was somebody's birthday we lost a day, and somebody missed their birthday.
It's interesting too, because many people had this built up anticipation and arrived in Japan, a place that was totally unfamiliar, but you'd already been there.
Yeah.
So there was some familiarity, including people that you knew, which is pretty dynamic. And it's a real juxtaposition compared to the majority of people that I can recall who landed there and said, nobody speaks English. I can't read a sign.
Yeah.
And I don't know anyone. And so that's pretty special.
It was Erin's 21st birthday in Japan. Her birthday is September 26th. And this is probably our best moment. Was we got a private karaoke room on like the 26th floor of some skyscraper in Tokyo. And it was a ball. It was a ball. But yeah, we got off the boat. We went straight to the family and they took us around, and they live in Yokohama. But
tell me a little bit about, how you traveled elsewhere. So excursions weren't really your thing. Did you create plans for yourself, or were you a little bit more improvisational, or did it depend on where you went?
Yeah, it was totally like, let the magic of the universe flow into whatever experience will unfold. I mean, I say that kind of the biggest personal change I had on that trip was I became very spiritual, because the magic that like unfolded the worlds of irrational incredibleness was something beyond my understanding of the 3D world until that time. And so anyway, yeah, no, literally, I mean, I'd have to go through all the countries, but in the beginning, I think there were a couple, and then by the end of it, it was just literally just go see what happens. So
Yeah.
we had a friend in Italy as well that we visited. In China, we knew that that would be difficult to travel, and so we did do a semi-organized trip in Beijing, and I think that's really the only one. In Vietnam, I did one volunteer thing at a school for like the blind and deaf, and it just didn't feel like I was really doing anything necessarily good. It was just like this foreign observer in some place I didn't belong. And so that was really my last excursion, I think.
Well, that sounds memorable, for, reasons that you don't necessarily want. Are there other standout experiences that have stayed with you over the course of time?
Morocco was like the most magical place I've ever been, or like, it wasn't even just the place, it was the whole experience. And well, because I speak French, it was actually pretty easy in Morocco. And I remember everybody was taking the Marrakesh Express to Marrakesh, and it was like the last port, and everybody wanted to, I'm sure you probably did, everybody wanted to like hang out together, but there was too many people to do anything. And so it was Summer Wheat and Dara Serber and Shannon Swallows and I decided to travel together. Summer is still like my best friend. We travel all over the world. Went to Egypt together last year. We went to the Dominican Republic last year. We went to Alaska. We've done she's like my travel buddy. And she got ordained online and was my priestess for my wedding that we did in a week during COVID, because my husband and I we're together forever. But during the COVID period, we were like going to have to be separated because of the restrictions on traveling. And so we decided to get married like that Saturday, and Summer got ordained online, flew down and to my mom's house, and we
Amazing. Oh, that's so sweet.
and she's an artist. She's a very successful artist, and she actually had this priestess robe with like a kundalini snake and all of these bees that she had sort of three-dimensionally woven in, and she's like, I have the perfect outfit. So anyway, Summer was there. We decided to get in a taxi to go to the train station and go to the Marrakesh Express. And the taxi driver started to try to rip us off. And we were kind of speaking English. And then I just switched to French. And then all of a sudden his attitude completely changed. And he was like, well, why don't you just let me drive you to Marrakesh? And he ended up taking us to his family's house, and the grandmother like served us this incredible mint tea, and there was no indoor plumbing. And then the best was that we're like hanging out with the family, and there's like a couple of children and the wife and the grandma. And then he emerges from the bedroom like ready to take us in like a 3-piece tuxedo. Like he has scored the deal of the century for his family to be able to take us around for a week and have this incredible job. Anyway, it was so fun. And we were just in the desert with, like, I remember just in the middle of we went to where the Sahara meets the Atlantic Ocean, and we went swimming in the ocean, and there were like little indigenous kids in the bush that drew pictures of us in the sand, and it was a full moon, and it was like the reddest moon I've ever seen. And for a while we were like staring at the horizon. We thought it was some sort of like phosphorus factory or something, and then it was this red moon after. We were like, that's the moon? Yeah, I mean, goats in the trees and that I've never seen before. And yeah, I mean, obviously the Islamic art and buildings and architecture, I mean, all of that is just out of this world. And all those bazaars. And I still have a couple of I particularly have like a beautiful star mirror that was made out of goat bone and all different colors, and that's kind of like one of my favorite pieces that I have in my house. Yeah, but that whole Morocco trip was by far the most magical for me.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly. And then I can only guess that, I mean, at least for me, with that being the last place, it's almost an opportunity to, I don't want to say get everything out of your system, but you start to see the light fading, so to speak. And
Yeah.
you want to try to bottle it all up as best you can.
You certainly don't want to go back to the real world.
No. Well, I guess let's talk about that. So, what was that adjustment like for you getting back and having this 100 days worth of incredible experiences? How did you reacclimate?
Well, and you might remember my father died while I was on the trip, and I actually flew home on the last day of Morocco. So I missed that whole passage, which I still like want to go talk to Semester at Sea and go do that passage. So that made it like doubly hard, right? I came back to a world of like of just not only just leaving the best experience of my life, but coming into some sort of just real tragedy. And I ended up actually taking the next semester off of school. I came down to visit you. I just like in Athens, I remember I just started road tripping kind of around the Southeast and visiting all my friends. Thank God we had that little book. I would just, as I drove cross country, I'd look in the state and be like, okay, who's there? I also ended up living with Brooke Nelson in Seattle for a couple of years once we were out of college, which was amazing. And she's in Portland now. I don't keep in close touch with her, but I was out west a couple of years ago and did see her and her family. She's married to a guy that she met when we were living together, and that's just so fun. But yeah, so I took a semester off and just tried to figure out how I was going to re-enter in the world. And then I ended up changing my major so I could graduate on time, and just like putting my head down and studying the last year and then moving on with my life.
Yeah, well, that's such an abrupt, I mean,
Yeah.
I think many people probably felt that they were like ripped from something when they landed in Miami. But I can only imagine like how difficult that must have been for you to just re-enter that kind of experience.
One thing too, just sort of logistically, one of the reasons I was kind of so overwhelmed too was because I missed that whole last 2 weeks of school, and I was behind in classes as it was, and I was planning on just buckling down as we crossed the Atlantic to finish. So they gave me a year to finish all that. So actually during that whole semester I took off, I was remotely finishing all of these papers and
So your journey continued, but not necessarily.
It's true. And I remember I had to like write about, I took a theater class and I had to write about all of these. We were supposed to see 4 theater shows in 4 countries. And then of course we did acting. Actually, it was an acting class. And I just remember like, it was like the very beginning of internet. And I remember researching Vietnamese like Muppets, or what do you call it, like puppets online, and writing about the show I never went to in Vietnam to finish those papers. But I did. I mean, I went back. So yeah, it continued. And what were the other classes? I had acting, I had cultural anthropology, and I had the sociology of wealth and power, and then of course the core class. So I just worked on papers. Yeah, so my journey did continue, and I was researching, and it was actually really cool because I remember actually being home at my mom's with that core curriculum book and like rereading everything and like writing some papers and sort of closing all these classes out. That was probably like, it actually helped me find what helped me just sort of like, I don't want to say closure, but it helps me just sort of like round out the experience to reflect on it throughout that whole next semester and really just fill in all the gaps, because it was you were so present in that whole time that there was very little time for reflection. There probably was if I would have done more classwork, but I didn't. I was just too busy being present to really do much reflection. So yeah, that's really interesting. I actually haven't ever thought about that, but that did allow me a lot of time to reflect and I guess digest.
Yeah, I was going to use that word digest, and that's really fortunate. Some of the conversations that I've had, it's taken people 25 years, and many of us are still digesting 100 days worth of experience. And so I don't want to call it a luxury, but certainly the opportunity for you to focus on taking what you had experienced and then processing it over time and overlaying that maybe with some academics helped to possibly cement and reinforce what you actually went through during that really rapid ingestion of cultural experiences.
Yeah, I mean, I remember it was just so shocking. I actually used to say that the only place I really experienced culture shock was when I came back to the States. It felt really kind of normal everywhere. And then all this, it felt, maybe natural is a better word, and then it was like, whoa. When you go through something kind of tragic or whatever, you know, I mean, I'm saying tragic just in the reentry, not even with my father's death, which of course adds to it. But I mean, I could tell my brain wasn't working properly. And that's kind of a natural thing. Your brain sort of swells to allow the regular functions to optimize. And one of the best ways to sort of come out of that is to continue to study. So I wasn't ready for like a full-time semester, but it was a nice way to kind of engage my brain. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot I can say about all that, but
Yeah, no, kudos to you for doing that. And I think even having the maturity to know what you needed and give yourself that space and time to figure things out. Uh, I'd be remiss not to ask, because it still is in the after, but I wonder whether there was any influence. I know, and this may be surprising to some, that you were in the Navy.
Yeah.
Did the decision to take that course have any roots at all in your semester at sea experience?
Well, I actually had already committed to the Navy. They paid for my college, but I would say that I ended up in both of those paths similarly, because there's a, you know, along with the desire to travel, I always had a desire to be out at sea. When I signed up, it was a year of trial with the ROTC, and then I could quit if I didn't like it. And so I kind of, after the year, I was like, well, shoot, I was going abroad, and I just didn't know what else to do. And then for whatever reason, like mentally, the whole military was difficult for me, but the idea of being out at sea was very romantic for me. But the whole universe made it very clear that was the path that I needed to be on, regardless of the fact that it was incredible. I mean, it opened up so many doors for me, and I not only paid for the college education, but they sent me to several more sort of schools afterwards that have set me up for kind of success throughout my life and everything else I've done. So yeah, I mean, I was actually interested not only in being out at sea in the Navy, but I was actually really wanting to be a pilot, or maybe even an astronaut. And they have really good pilots, because you have to land on the aircraft carrier, not on and plus they have really good ports. You're always, you know, somewhere on the coast, versus the Air Force is in the middle.
I guess the last question really for the purposes of this is just, what would you say to your younger self, or to an impressionable person, about that experience, whether it's semester at sea or whether it's just some of the learnings that you had during an impressionable time in your life?
That's so interesting. It's so weird that you asked me that, because literally last night, I'm here staying with my Costa Rican mother, and she sent me a 1 minute clip, or 1 minute and 17-second clips of this exact question that she was asked. And it said, what would you tell yourself at age 20? And her answer was something about like, be enthusiastic about everything. And if I were to go back, if I were to be able to give some advice, I actually do this anyways. I go back and talk to my younger self all the time. But at age 20, man, I mean, honestly, I don't think I would. So much of what was amazing about that experience was that it was new. And so it's like that it was uncharted territories. And so in some ways, and you know, I think that like, so I cringe at some of the stuff that I used to do in terms of like safety or whatever, but I wouldn't do it any other way, because that's kind of how you learn, right? I was kind of on the edge a lot in everything I did. But no, I mean, I think the things that were uncomfortable, I'm grateful for the discomfort that had. And so in some ways I don't want to give advice, because I want to go through all of that, that roller coaster of learning. But I think I read it was probably right after I graduated college, I read the Tao Te Ching for the first time. And that one quote, if you flow as life flows, you've solved the enigma of existence. And I think when I had done that in the past, that's when I knew I was on the right path. And when I hadn't, I wasn't. And I think that would be the advice I would give anybody at any stage of their life, you know, and you kind of have to experience it to know it. Once you know it, it's unmistakable.
Thank you, Kat.
thanks for checking out this edition of Voyage of Rediscovery. And don't forget to also check out sas25th.com. That's SAS25th.com for everything fall 1998. We'll see you next time. And remember, if you're not back by 8 p.m., the ship will leave without you.